Hello everyone, have not done a video in quite some time, however I now have something to do to the Noble, so it's given me a great excuse to do some content. I have been suffering with this sticking brake issue still. Went out a little while ago now for a run, same thing happened, brakes started to bind on and then they got worse and worse until I had to pull over and then the car was just completely locked solid. I've had a good chat with a few people on the Noble Facebook group, and Alphonse on there has talked me through in private messaging. We've gone through all the kind of different scenarios that it could be, and we've come up with something that we've really narrowed it down to, which will be the brake servo. The reason we've got to that conclusion is because I've had new calipers, I've had the brake lines thoroughly checked, I've had the discs and hubs cleaned up and discs skimmed on hub, and I've had the master cylinder rebuilt. It really only leaves the servo in all honesty, but what we've discovered is once the brakes bind up and they lock on, it's only after high RPM, so sort of 4,500 RPM for kind of like 2 or 3 seconds, it seems to happen after that. As soon as I pull over and disconnect the vacuum hose, the brakes instantly release. So we think that there's a bit of bleed through on the servo and it's just putting a bit of pressure onto the brakes and that's causing the problem. So my job now is to get the servo out of here and to try and replace it. So let's get to it. Okay, so I've removed the drip tray, the carbon drip tray that was on there, taken the wipers off as well, and then we can see our servo here. Now, here's some interesting facts for you about this servo. I would like to replace the whole servo. Unfortunately, you cannot get this servo anymore. What I have found out is it's from an MG V8. So that's an MG V8 back in the sort of 90s. They were around. This servo isn't made anymore. It would have been made by AP, but they don't supply that part anymore. It's very similar, funny enough, to a classic mini servo, and this particular one-way valve here is actually the same for all of them. So I've checked with one that I ordered online, and Austin. Oh, actually, it was a Rover Mini one. It was exactly the same. So I will be replacing that. But what I can do is take this out. I do know that Dave at DTB has a second-hand one somewhere that he was working, which I'm going to try put back in. And then again, thanks to the help of the Facebook Noble group, I've actually found a company that said, look, if you send it to us, we're pretty positive we'll be able to rebuild it, and I should get that back as good as new. So, next job now, let's get this washer bottle out of the way, let's clean up the area so I've got a lot of space, and let's see if I can start to take the master cylinder off of the front of the servo. So, as you can see, in here there's a couple of, I think they're 10 mils. Let's just double check. Actually they might not be 10 mil. Okay, so both knots are off. You can see that I've managed to move the master cylinder back. That's what the inside of the servo looks like, I guess. See it just in there. It's looking pretty rough. Okay, so basically here's the pedal box. You can see there, it goes right up under there, but you can see that there's an R-clip here, back here, can't get to it, which disconnects the pin going into the servo, and then you can kind of see, let me just get in there, the 4 bolts. There's 1, 2, and then there's 2 above. My camera's not quite good enough, you can see that. And that should basically then be the whole servo should just be able to pop out. The R pin. Okay, so all 4 bolts are out, but interestingly, I'm trying to shine the torch up there, look at the clutch master cylinder. That has got a leak, and it's clearly had a leak for some time because it's taken all the paint off of the steel there, and then surface rust has got around it. So that definitely needs to come off and be replaced or rebuilt.
So as with other in a noble ownership, you go to fix one job and you find something else. That is the way of the car. But then it is 20 years old and it was hand built. So cool. We should be able to get the servo out now. Okay, so this unit now is going to take a bit of trying to do this one-handed. It's not easy. You can hear the washers coming off. I'll just put the camera down and hopefully with two hands I can get this out. There we are. She's out. Excellent. I might just see if I'm sending that one away, see if they can repair it. It would make sense. Interestingly enough, and don't be alarmed by this, obviously Nobles are old and this is an outside part of the car, but it looks worse than it is. It does look worse than it is. Get some wire brush on there, get some rust converter and then some paint, that'll be absolutely fine. It's still really, really solid. Just looks a lot worse than it is. But I've got to get this out now. Okay, so master cylinder for the clutch has got to come out. Got to undo this bolt up, this bolt here, and then those two, but they actually go all the way through the bulkhead. It's not like it's a stud, so basically I've got to somehow get my hand inside the car and outside the car to undo them, but I'm sure I'll figure it out. Main thing is, let's get it off. It's been leaking for a while, as you can see, and we need to sort that out. So one bolt's out. I've taken off the pin, I've taken off one of the top bolts, sorry, bottom bolt on the slave cylinder, but the easiest way to do it, well, is to get some help in. So, as you can see, got one man holding the 13mm there, and I'm going inside to contort myself and get to that bolt under there. Right, so we've now removed the old master cylinder. You can see it's pretty manky. I measured where the rose joint was so that I can make sure I can put it back in the same sort of place. That's really for your pedal adjustment. Interestingly enough, when I drained out the fluid, look at that. So I would say it definitely needed to be sorted out. So we've got a nice shiny new one. But now we've got the room to clean up the bulkhead. So we'll do that next. Okay, so there we are. The surface rust has been treated. I've cleaned it all up with a grinder. Put some rust converter primer on there. I've touched up on the inside of the car as well. I'm going to let that go off, and then it'll have a couple more coats before then the master cylinder for the clutch can go back in. So if anyone's interested to know where the bleed nipple is on the clutch, it's right down here behind the gear linkage. You can just see it there. It's an 11mm plastic nut. You can see I put the rubber cap over the end. A real pain in the arse to get to, in all honesty, but we've bled it through and got it working fine. However, I think there is a slight problem and the whole lot might have to come back out again. So here is the problem. Look at where the clutch pedal is in relation to the other pedals. It's way too high. Now, there is an adjustment on the threads of the rod going into the cylinder, and that is the problem. I didn't check the length of that rod, so I adjusted it. I put the I forget the name of it now, rose joint on the end to the same depth as on the other one, but I didn't actually measure the rods. So here we are, folks. I've taken the bolts back out. I decided not to try and cut it in the car because it was just simple just to pull this out, but you can see the difference now. The rod is, yeah, probably just under an inch shorter, and that makes all the difference when it was in the car. So I can now cut this out of the car and then put it back in, and hopefully I won't have to do any more bleeding.
So the clutch master cylinder is now back in with a shortened rod, which is great. Which means I can move on to this little puppy here. Now this might look a little bit different from the one that you saw me remove. That's because it is. Dave at DTB Motorsport kindly sent me this. This is a second-hand unit that he's had that is tested and working. So I'm going to fit it in whilst my other one is being refurbished. The reason being is it means I can use the car, I can test it out and make sure it is 100% the Servo, which I'm confident it is. And then when to switch this out isn't actually that big a job, so I can then do that once the new one comes back in. So now I'm going to go stick this into that hole.
So, lots of twisting, moving, doing everything I can, but all bolted up with stainless steel nuts and washers, nylocks in there. So now my pedal sits exactly where they should. The only thing I've got to do now is test it. So test that the clutch is operating exactly as it is, not slipping because of the maybe where it's got any pressure on it, which it won't be slipping, but also that it fully engages as well. So I've got to check that. And then of course I've got to check the brakes to make sure that they don't lock up, because there is a chance obviously that could still happen. They could still end up binding. 99.9% sure that won't happen with this servo, but of course I still don't know that this servo, even though I'm sure it is good, but I still don't know that for sure that it's not got a problem as well. I'd be amazed. The odds of that happening are pretty low. In fact, I might, if it does happen, I might enter the lottery. But anyway, let's give it a test and see what happens.
And here we are from the other side. So you can see it's all connected up now. All looking nice. All I need to do is put obviously the wiper arms back on, the washer jets and all, and then the drip tray over the top. But what I am going to do is I'm going to test it without doing any of that, just to make sure, because if I do need to take it off, I don't want to be ripping everything back out again. Okay, so taking it out for a drive, kept the RPMs at quite high. It's been absolutely fine, no binding, nothing at all, so the brakes have been working absolutely perfect, so it definitely was the servo, and that problem is now fixed, which is excellent. The clutch is working fine, I'm really pleased with that. There is, however, as always, one more thing, and that is, when I push the clutch in, there is a squeak. That squeak's been there for a little bit of time, it comes and goes. The only fix is to take out the slave cylinder inside the gearbox. Now to do that, I have to take the engine out. So for now, I'm going to leave it, but when I get more jobs, I will obviously get round and get that done as well. I appreciate there are no videos of this car driving on the page yet, so I will get some of those very soon. But yeah, for now, job well done. Thanks for watching.